Welcome back. Let's run our cables. Start by undoing your X-axis drag chain and slide it out the other side. Here you will need the following cables: the Z end stop cable, the Z stepper cable, and if you have a water-cooled spindle, you'll need your water lines and your spindle cable. We can now pop open our drag chain, move along with a flathead screwdriver until you have opened all of them. As I'm running a 2.2 kilowatt water-cooled spindle, I need to run my spindle cable and my water lines. I like to tape these at one end to make sure that they end up the same length. Place them into the cable drag chain, making sure that they stay neat and not tangled or crossing over each other. Check you have a bit of room for the Z axis to move up and down, and then grab your Z motor and Z end stop cables and lay them into your drag chain as well. If you're running your spindle wire through your drag chain like I am, try to use the cooling lines to separate it from the Z motor and Z end stop cables, as this will help prevent EMI. Once you're happy with the placement, go ahead and snap down the cable chain links. Then curve the cable chain under back to its correct position and tighten down the drop-in T-nut. We can now move on to the Y-axis drag chain. Again, slide the drag chain out to the other side of the machine and work your way through opening all the doors with a flathead screwdriver. Feed your wires through, again keeping them straight without crossing over, and where possible, separate the spindle cable from the motor and end stop cables. Once they are all through, you can grab your X-axis motor and end stop cable. Thread these through, leaving enough room for the end stop to be placed on top of the X-axis. We can adjust the length of these later, so don't worry too much. Once you're happy with the placement, you can snap the doors back down and curl the drag chain back under the machine. Now we can wire up the motors. Starting with the X-axis motor, included with the kit are these connectors. They work just fine if you take time and make sure each wire gets a good connection. Don't use solder on your wires here, as the solder will break down over time being compressed by the connectors. On the first connector, loosen the screws and you can place the wires in any order and tighten them down. Test the wire to make sure that it is well seated, as this is often a spot where people have an issue. Once you're happy, plug the other end into the connector and repeat, this time matching the wire colors. Now for my preferred method. As we don't change these wires or need to unplug them, I like to solder mine for peace of mind. I also like to put a bit of braided cable sleeve over the top. If you're going this route, you simply need to match the colors and solder them together, then apply some heat shrink. If you can, please don't use a lighter like I'm using here, but in a pinch it will do. Onto the far side Y-axis motor. I like to remove the end caps and route my cable through the rear 20x40 extrusion like so. Once at the other end, wire it to the motor the same way you did the X-axis, and use a zip tie to secure it. Now the last Y-axis motor. Again, the same steps can be repeated here, and then zip tie it to the standoffs on the motor. And lastly, the same on our Z-axis motor. Okay, now that all our motors are wired up, we can move on to our end stops. First off, we need to mount our end stops to our end stop mounts, which are included. Using the two M2 screws, thread them through the holes in the mount and into the back of the end stop in this orientation. Don't over tighten the screws, as it is easy to crack the end stops. Now thread the M4 Tina onto the 10mm M4 bolt one turn and repeat this process for the remaining two end stops. Over to our machine's x-axis, plug the wires into the C and NC pins, and install the end stop so that the linear bearing will activate the switch upon contact. Tighten down the Tina and move over to the Z-axis. I'll show you another way you can mount these particular end stops, which prevents them from getting damaged if you crash a machine. Start by again wiring the C and NC pins, but when installing the end stop, turn it sideways. Test that your end stop will activate by sliding it into the bearing and tighten when you're happy with its placement. Tuck the wires into the V-slot. You can use a daub of hot glue here to hold them neatly in place. Retest your placement by moving the axis up and down by hand. Now over to the back of the machine, we can repeat these steps on the Y-axis. Okay, that's it for motors and end stops. Check out my other videos for how to solder your spindle cable. Once you have done that, place your spindle into your machine and install the cable. Then go ahead and install your water cooling lines. Thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't, please like and subscribe as it really helps me out. Also, stay tuned as in the next episode we will go through wiring up the UC300 controller.